The desert was breathing in slow, tired sighs when I first saw them. Two shapes curled beside a sun-bleached wash, half-shadowed by dusk, as if the fading light tried to protect what little life still clung to them. I remember how the sky looked then, wide and hushed, colored like old bruises, because I had been wandering for months with nothing but my own loneliness riding my shoulders. Every night felt the same until that moment, when something in the wind bent toward me, urging me closer, whispering that fate sometimes arrives looking broken. And as I guided my horse down the slope, my heart began a faint, frightened beat of hope, though I didn't yet understand why. The older woman stirred first. Her cheek bore a fading streak of dried blood, her dark hair tangled with dust, her breath shallow but stubborn. The younger one lay across her lap, weight light as a memory. Their clothes were torn, their skin sunburned, their spirits weathered by fear I could almost smell through the rising coolness of evening. I knelt beside them and felt their distrust before either opened their eyes, the kind born from too many cruelties endured in silence. Still, I reached for my canteen with hands I tried to keep steady, unsure if they'd accept my help, unsure if I deserved the chance to offer it, and when the older woman's cracked lips touched the water, something fragile shifted between us, trembling like a newborn truth. Her name was Nayeli. The younger one was Asha. Apache sisters, lost far from home, though they didn't have the strength to tell me how or why. They spoke with glances more than words, their eyes darting between me and the gathering twilight, measuring danger with instincts sharpened by a lifetime of survival. I tried not to force reassurance, knowing tender gestures mean more than declarations, so I built a small fire and let its warmth speak for me. The flames flickered across their faces, revealing bruises, exhaustion, and the hint of stubborn resilience. I sensed their fear of men, of kindness, of debts owed, and for a moment I wondered if my presence brought them comfort or unease, though their quiet, weary nods told me they'd chosen trust, even if only for the night. I brought them to my cabin at first light. The journey was slow, each step deliberate, the desert air sharp enough to cut through our silence. My home sat at the edge of forgotten land, too far from town to feel safe, too close to civilization to feel alone, and as the cabin came into view, I wondered whether shelter was enough. Whether two women as wounded as they were could find any rest inside those thin wooden walls. Whether I, a man carrying my own failures like rattling spurs, could offer anything worth taking. Yet when we crossed the threshold, Asha exhaled a shaky breath that sounded almost like relief, and Nayeli lowered her shoulders by an inch, a gesture so small, so subtle, it settled into my heart like a warm ember waiting to rise. But the world has a long habit of punishing those who step outside its narrow rules. Word spread faster than dust on a storm wind. Deputy Lyle Booker stopped by before sunset, tipped his hat without warmth, and looked at the sisters the way some men look at strays, pity mixed with suspicion. He asked too many questions not because he cared for their safety but because he distrusted anything that didn't fit neatly into the shape of his world. When he rode away, leaving behind the sour scent of judgment, I felt the sisters draw closer to the shadows, as though society were already hunting them again. And in their silence, I recognized a loneliness that mirrored my own, a loneliness that made me want to shield them from every harsh gaze, every whispered assumption, every door closed before it had a chance to open. Days passed like soft, uncertain steps into a new life. Nayeli recovered quickly, her strength returning first to her eyes, then to her hands. She helped repair the corral fence, chopped vegetables, mended a shirt of mine without being asked. Asha, shy and still trembling from old wounds, spent her mornings tracing shapes in the dirt with a stick, sketching delicate spirals and rising suns. Sometimes she looked at me with something like gratitude, other times with a quiet curiosity that made me swallow words before they formed. I did not ask them for stories, I let the wind carry whatever truths they weren't ready to speak. Their presence filled the cabin with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years, and I found myself waking each morning before dawn just to hear their soft movements. Proof that life could sound like healing instead of heartache. Love crept in without announcement. Not the dramatic kind sung about in saloons, but the sort that grows through shared chores and quiet glances. Through the way Nayeli brushed hair from Asha's face, the way Asha hummed while tending the fire, the way both of them sat a little nearer to me each evening as the desert cooled around us. I never reached for their hands, still they found mine in subtle touches, fingers brushing grain off my palms after a harvest day, knuckles grazing as we passed plates at supper. These gestures said more than any vow I could have spoken. They softened the hardened edges of my spirit until one morning I realized I no longer woke alone in the world, even when they slept in the next room, breathing soft as feathers caught in a motionless breeze. Then came the night they asked me to be their husband. The request arrived not as a plea but as a gentle offering, shared in the glow of lamplight and woven with ancient tradition. Nayeli spoke first, voice steady but vulnerable. Asha watched me with hopeful stillness. They explained that in their custom, unions could form around protection, respect, balance. They offered themselves not out of desperation but out of a belief that our lives had intertwined long before we recognized it. My heart stumbled. I feared failing them, feared not being enough, feared that accepting might entangle them in a future shaped by my own regrets. Yet the sincerity in their eyes undid every doubt, and I found myself saying yes before I even realized the word had crossed my lips. The ceremony was simple. A braided cord. A vow whispered into the settling dusk. The wind carrying blessings across the sand as though ancient spirits nodded approval. The three of us stood beneath a sky that felt impossibly wide, impossibly forgiving, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of belonging root itself inside me, deep and trembling. Our hands clasped. Our breaths mingled. Our shadows stretched across the earth like a single promise. For a fleeting moment, I believed the universe had finally decided I'd suffered enough loneliness. That was when the hoofbeats approached, slow, deliberate, echoing through the canyon like distant thunder. My breath hitched as a solitary rider materialized from the fading horizon. He dismounted with the kind of authority that came not from arrogance but ancestry. His long braids framed a stern, unreadable face. His eyes held the weight of storms. And when Nayeli whispered, "Father," the world tilted beneath my feet, leaving me suspended between past and future, unsure which direction threatened more. Raven Greyhawk stood before us in silence. He surveyed his daughters first, touching Asha's cheek with a tenderness that contradicted his imposing stature, then turned to me. His gaze didn't judge in the way Booker's had. It assessed, measured, probed the truth of my intentions with a depth that made my chest tighten. He asked no questions, yet each second felt like a trial I wasn't certain I'd pass. I wanted to speak, to explain how I found them, how I cherished them, how they changed me in ways I hadn't realized I needed changing, but words felt clumsy, loud, unworthy of the moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and edged with the grief of a father who had almost lost everything. He did not come to tear them away from me. Instead, he presented an offer: land adjoining his tribe's territory, a place to build a life under the guidance and protection of their traditions, if, and only if, I vowed to guard Nayeli and Asha with the devotion their lineage deserved. It was not a bargain. It was a recognition. A passing of responsibility wrapped in trust older than any lawman's decree. And though my throat tightened, though fear churned beneath my ribs, I understood the depth of what he offered, and the depth of what he asked. I stepped forward, my voice barely more than a whisper, but honest as any truth carved into rock by time itself. I told him I accepted, not for land, not for status, but because his daughters had become the pulse of my days. Because protecting them felt as natural as breathing. Because loneliness had shaped me, but love had remade me. And as Raven studied me, a softness flickered in his expression, brief yet unmistakable, like the desert showing mercy through an unexpected rain. We ended that night around a quiet fire, the flames low, the air cool, the world paused in a moment that felt suspended between sorrow and renewal. Raven shared stories of their childhood. Nayeli leaned into my shoulder. Asha hummed a tune so gentle it made the stars seem closer. I realized then that I had not saved them. We had saved each other. Three broken souls forming something whole, bound not by circumstance but by choice, by tenderness, by the courage to trust again. And if you're listening now, if some part of you recognizes the ache of wandering alone across a life that feels too wide, know this: sometimes healing arrives disguised as responsibility. Sometimes love grows from gestures so small they nearly go unnoticed. Sometimes belonging is not found but built, slowly, patiently, like coaxing a flame from stubborn embers. And if you ever stumble upon those who need you as much as you need them, let the wind guide you toward them, for the story of your healing may only just be beginning.